Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I'm going to start out with a word that I absolutely know not a lot about, and that's exactly why we are chatting today. And the word is onboarding. It seems like a simple word, but the more that I looked into this, the more I realized how many people miss this word. And I found this statistic, a couple of them, but this one was shocking. It said 88% of organizations admit that they don't onboard well. And so I thought, as soon as I see that great of amount of people struggling with something, I'm going to find an expert, and I'm honored to be hanging out with Monique Daigneault. How are you today, Monique?
Hi, Dave. I am great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are president and CEO of MD Consulting in the metropolis of Phoenix, Arizona. So thanks so much. We could use some warm weather, so don't feel like you have to hog it all for yourself. But thanks so much for hanging out. So fill us in a little bit on what MD Consulting is.
We provide executive coaching to leaders struggling with workplace challenges and pain points.
Okay.
And we also provide HR consulting, and HR is a big umbrella. So the consulting we provide is in the way of training, onboarding, training programs, training plans, things like that. So between both the executive coaching and the HR consulting, we really try to help organizations treat their people as best they can.
That's awesome. Wow. And so, I think back to when I was a kid and my parents were working in the workplace, which feels like 100 years ago. But it's funny when you think about the corner office, the boss in the corner office barking out orders. Times have changed big time since then. And all of a sudden, people are a huge focus. So I'm excited to unpack this, because this really starts, at the interview time and carries through that. So are you involved in the interviewing process as well for some of your clients, Monique?
I can be, yes. Many of my clients don't interview well. They don't have policies and procedures in place for interviewing or for screening candidates. And we try to help with that if that's one of the gaps that they have.
Okay. Well, and it's funny, when I talk to my clients, I talked to one about a position, and I don't even remember office manager was the position for this individual company. And they said they got like 170 people. I don't know if it was on Indeed or where it was, but they got a huge amount of interest generated. I got to believe, though, in the little bit of work that I help my clients with kind of navigate these waters, of the vast majority of those 170 in this case aren't even really, qualified. They don't fit into the culture. I mean, do you help people through that struggle from that perspective as well?
Sure, because you're right. There are a lot of people that can apply, and an HR department doesn't have the time or the resources to interview masses of people.
Sure.
So there are some basic screening processes they can go through initially. Some companies have software that automatically screens out resumes when they come in. But as far as the actual people, it's really important that a company has a job description.
Okay.
So that they can compare the expectations in the job description to the resumes that they are getting in. And there are many other tools to help with screening. The companies that I help are all different in the types of assessments they use. There's so many types of assessments.
Sure.
So that is one way, but definitely comparing that resume to the job description and to what the hiring managers understand already of the company culture is really important to have a good fit.
So how often, because company culture comes up seemingly more and more, but I feel like people struggle with what it means. They struggle to explain it. So if you're talking to somebody in HR, or you're talking to an entrepreneur business owner, and are you asking what kind of culture do you have and then coaching them on what they have? Because I seem to run into a lot of people that you get a blank stare when you ask, what is your company culture here, right? You get that kind of like deer in the headlight look, not really sure what to say. So are you helping them kind of put words, and create that culture as well?
Culture, and it's the topic of one of the chapters of the book I'm writing, is all about company culture. And to your point, a lot of companies don't really understand what kind of culture they have. By the time they're interviewing candidates, it's almost too late to start creating the culture and figuring out what it is.
Right?
But
Yeah.
it's good to at least talk with them and see if they understand and if they can articulate it.
Sure.
Because the other side of the coin is that they may know what kind of culture they have, but they may not be able to articulate it. And really, culture, from what I've seen from my experience and partly my opinion, is the way things are done in a company, which means it's different for every company.
Sure.
The set of best practices that a company has in place, the way they communicate to each other, the way they hold their meetings, the way they handle their onboarding and their training. It's different for every company. So if they don't have what they feel is a solid culture, that's a different area that I can work with them in versus hiring. But they need to be clear on that. If they aren't clear on it by the time they're hiring, they're going to have a hard time finding a candidate that fits and a candidate that is in alignment, because you want to look at the culture of the company, the values of the company, and then the individual needs to look at their values and how does that align. So if either one or the other, the candidate or the company cannot articulate their own values and what's important to them, it's going to be really hard to make a good choice for candidates.
So, I mean, I think about this, 170 people apply for one position, but yet I'm hearing the reverse of this from entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite, that we can't find people. Now, maybe they should say we can't find the right people, because it sure feels like 170 just purely from a math perspective. And I don't like math, so I'm thinking 107, right? Most of us don't, right? It's like there's 170 people. Surely there's one gem in there somewhere, and so that's where I guess I'm trying to understand. On one hand, there's all, these people supposedly out of work, but yet there's all these positions being unfilled. So do you find yourself in that quandary of struggling to find the right person that fits for that right bus seat?
Do you mean the companies that I work with? Are they finding?
Correct. Yeah.
Many of them are. Some of them are relaxing their expectations a little bit and more willing to provide additional training, additional support, mentoring for somebody that's coming on board. And I think it all depends on the urgency of the situation when they're doing the hiring. Some companies have some wiggle room where they can delay the hiring process and keep interviewing until they find the right person. Others, it's more urgent, so they have to relax some of their expectations a little bit.
Gotcha. So if we're sitting in an interview, or you're sitting in with an interviewer coaching your clients, or you have somebody listening today that's in the interviewing process trying to find somebody on their team. I mean, I've interviewed hundreds of people in my day for a variety of different reasons, and it's rare to find somebody that doesn't really know how to interview. They usually interview pretty well. They usually know how to answer the questions. How do you weed through, the people that are just saying what you want to hear versus the people that are really, really, like if teamwork is really important for this job, and we ask the question, are you a team player, or whatever your wording would be, who's going to say, oh my gosh, Monique, I am such not a team player? I mean, who's going to say that? But yet, we do a ton of work with DISC. personality, behavior assessments. And so you can see a lot of times that kind of stuff. How do you help your clients navigate that jungle to be able to end up with somebody that's really authentic?
So I see two sides of it because I work for the companies who are doing the hiring. They contract me to come in, but I also coach the executives who at times are looking for jobs.
Okay, great.
So I got both sides of it.
Excellent.
And in each situation, I really coach them on using behavioral interview questions.
Okay.
And these are questions that are like, tell me about a time when you had to handle conflict. What was the situation? What did you do and how did it turn out?
Okay.
Tell me about a time when you had to organize a big project. How did you stay organized? How did you keep everybody on track? How did you communicate with stakeholders?
Oh, gotcha.
So it used to be where companies would ask yes and no questions.
Okay.
Do you handle conflict? And to your point, of course, everyone's going to say, yes, I handle it really well.
Yeah, exactly.
But now it's more about the behavioral interview questions. So if I'm working for an organization who is interviewing, I encourage them to use behavioral interview questions for the candidates. And there are lists and lists of behavioral interview questions, but I have them choose questions that pertain to the position that they are hiring for. If it's a sales position, there's certain questions that would apply to sales.
Gotcha.
The candidate, if the candidate is my client and they are interviewing for a position, same thing. We look at the job description, we get really clear on what role they're applying for, and I have them pick questions from the list that they think will apply because they know their own industry and field better than I do.
Sure.
They pick the interview questions, they write out their scenario examples, and they send them to me. And in coaching sessions, I play the hiring manager and we role play.
Ah, gotcha.
And I ask them the questions, I ask them follow-up questions. I'm looking for their examples for them to be really clear on the examples that they give me. If they explain an example and it doesn't sound like it quite hits the mark, I'll give them feedback that they've got to be better about this. They've got to come up with a more solid example. Some people try to get around behavioral interview questions because they don't practice and think of examples. So when they go into an interview, they're asked about a time when, and instead of giving an example of something from the past that they actually did, they say, well, if I had to handle conflict, this is how I would do it. But that's not the question.
Gotcha.
So I coach them to make sure they don't dodge the question. Because some people accidentally dodge it, or some people purposely dodge it. So we practice, we role play, we go over and over until they know those scenarios in their head and they no longer have to use notes. And by then they have gone through various examples and it helps them appear much stronger in an interview. If they can give specific examples, especially if those examples can be tied to a metric, an amount of money they saved, a number of clients they trained, something like that. It's really based on the behavioral interview questions, and that's how a company can avoid having somebody just say, sure, I can do that. I know how to do that. I handle that really well.
Wow, that's a great tip. So if you're listening, and I want to reiterate what Monique just said, because those 6 words, tell me about a time when, are so powerful. And I think that's a great way to circumvent the potential for people that may or may not understand the question, or they may understand and then they might not want to answer it. And so it's tell me about a time when, rather than how do you handle, or did you handle, or a yes or no question. So that's a really great tool. And, behavior interview questions, those are great. I mean, and the scary thing is, so I'm going to full disclosure right here, as you're talking and thinking to myself, if Monique asked me that question I would not know a time in the recent past that I had conflict, that I handled it in a certain way. So if I'm going to look at both sides of this. So if I'm the one asking the question and the person answering struggles with an answer, what do you do? And secondly, if I'm the one getting the question asked to me and I really can't think, I go blank, I'm nervous, I just freeze up. I mean, what the heck do you do in those situations? Because I can see a lot of times we go with the pat answers or the pat questions, share with me one of your weaknesses. Well, most people know that already, so they've already got that kind of answered. When you interrupt the pattern, which I love, it sure can bring up a huge potential, almost like a train wreck. So how do you coach both sides so that it ends in a positive way? Because I'm still not able to answer that question 4 minutes after you asked me.
Right. So the top thing is practice first.
Okay.
I always have them practice it so they won't be in that situation. But if they've practiced and their mind goes blank, they draw a blank, it's perfectly okay, first of all, to pause. Mm-hmm. And think for a second, or to say, let me think about that for a second, or to say, can we come back to that one? I can't think of an example offhand.
Sure.
Some people have examples, but they're not recent from their recent job.
Yeah.
So in cases like that, it's okay to say, well, this isn't from a recent situation, but this is from the past. And really that's about all you can do. Sure. And the interviewer sees that you're trying.
Yep.
If it feels awkward, the interviewer can always say, well, that's okay, we'll come back to that, or why don't you think about that and we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Wow, that would freak me out. I mean, I'm still trying to come up with one, right? But I mean, as the interviewee, as the one getting the interview, if you always want to be, like Johnny on the spot, quick with an answer. But if there's not really a quick answer, I think you bring up a great point. Number one, say it's a great question. I've never really thought about it. Something to buy you a little bit of time. And you may have to be able to say, wow, I really, that I maybe you're not a conflicting type. Maybe conflict isn't a big thing for you and you just give in. And maybe that's your answer that they're looking for. So, I mean, that's a really good question, and great. Now you got me thinking about it. So now I got to come up with the answer, Monique. So as we go, I'm going to keep seeing if I can come up with something. So, but I think that, the onboarding, once that interview goes on and we come to terms, that's probably really when you jump in, because that onboarding is crazy. I found another statistic that said strong onboarding process improves retention by 82% and productivity by 70%. That's a Glassdoor statistic. So even if cut it in half, I like to cut statistics in half because maybe somebody wasn't thinking right that day. But an onboarding process can improve your retention by, let's say, 40% and productivity by 35%. All of a sudden, I'm looking going, why is onboarding not like paramount? Why is this not being done everywhere, especially when 88% of organizations say they don't onboard well? What's the disconnect? What's the disconnect that you're finding there?
Well, there's another great statistic, sad but true, that 20% of turnover happens within 45 days because of a lack of onboarding.
Sure.
It's devastating. And it costs the company so much money to recruit, hire, interview, train, only to have people leave within 45 days.
Yeah.
So an onboarding program is critical. And especially if, say, a company is having trouble finding candidates or finding the right one, a good onboarding program can be used as a sort of a sales technique to get candidates on board, because a company can promote that they have a really robust onboarding program and that their people will be well taken care of within the first 60 and 90 days.
Okay.
So if a company is very confident in their onboarding program, they need to leverage that in their hiring process.
Oh, that's a really great point. So, and I don't know any program, so I'm going to ask you the question. If I'm a CEO or entrepreneur and I'm looking to expand my team, where would I look for a checklist, or where would I look for some onboarding tools? Where do I start with that?
Well, I've put together a checklist for your listeners that you're free to send out afterwards. Okay. And it's pretty comprehensive. I'm going to just grab mine and read off just a couple of the many things that are on this checklist so that people understand. And this is compiled from executives I've worked with over 25 years, corporations I've worked with, my own poor onboarding experiences when I was in the corporate world, and my opinion. Again, always have to insert that.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
I have a whole list of things that should be included in an onboarding program. And it starts with addressing all the human resource policies and procedures, getting a candidate their login, their equipment, things like that, scheduling shadowing with people throughout the company so that the new hire is not just meeting their teammates, but they're getting a broad picture of the entire organization and everything that goes on. Coordinating a teach back. So once the new hire meets these people, gets around the organization, learns some things, they need to teach it back to their team.
Wow.
So it gives the new hire an opportunity to teach. So it's helping them with their training skills. Okay. And the team is learning from the new hire. So the teach backs are really important. Providing the employee with all the internal links to resources, information, intranet type materials that they need to read, the vision, the mission of the company. It's important that an employee understand that also.
Sure.
Assigning a buddy to work with them, another peer on their team, so that they're not always going to the hiring manager with questions within that first 30 days. Sure. They have someone else that they can go to. It's very important to immediately have the hiring manager schedule one-to-ones with that person so that the hiring manager is meeting with them on a pretty regular basis, once a week, once every other week, to touch base and make sure they're having a good experience. A lot of new hires are kind of left on their own to navigate the whole company, and it contributes to poor onboarding. They're not happy, they're not going to stay. Wow. Creating a 30, 60, 90-day plan with the new employee so that the new employee understands the expectations of the manager, what they are expected to accomplish within that first 3 months. That's really the critical time, is the first 3 months. Assigning them more than just a buddy, but an actual mentor, a formal mentor. And a lot of companies also don't have mentoring programs. So that's another piece. It's somewhat connected to onboarding, but it's a separate piece in and of itself.
Okay.
And then if there's virtual onboarding, because that's what's happening now, is that a lot of companies are onboarding virtually because some aren't back in the office yet. Sure. But if there's virtual onboarding happening, really they can do all the same things I just mentioned and everything on this checklist, but they should also include any protocol that the company now has in place about virtual meetings, meeting clients virtually, virtual best practices, resources about work-life balance, working from home, because that has created a whole nother level of stress for employees trying to work from home when there are kids and things like that. So if a company is doing remote onboarding and they're going to have remote employees, they now need to add to their onboarding package by having these remote resources that will help these employees navigate that whole new world.
Wow.
And then after all of that, the next step is the onboarding program needs to be measured. It's more than just creating the onboarding program and executing it, but then you want to make sure it's successful. and that you're not hitting that 20% of turnover within 45 days. So you want to measure it in a number of different ways. You want to collect feedback from the new hires along the way. You want to collect feedback from other people within the company who do hiring. And really, if an employee does leave, there should be an exit interview.
Okay,
and
sure.
These questions should be asked. That should be a question on the exit interview: is what was your onboarding program like, or do you think it was successful? So that's a snapshot of what's on this checklist, but it's pretty comprehensive. And I don't know any companies that have something this comprehensive. I don't know if you have seen that.
Never. Nope, not at all. And that's where, so this is, I don't know how good your ears are, but as you were talking, I was hearing the brakes screech from all these entrepreneurs listening. And they were just like, oh my gosh, okay, I love it, but where in the world am I going to find the time? You know, how am I going to do this? I'm exhausted. I finally found somebody, Monique. So I'm like, you know what? And I'm not saying this is right. This is just how it goes. Let's just be real, right? It took you like 45 or 60 days of added energy on top of all the other things that you didn't really have time to do in the first place. You find this person that you think is going to be, you know, a good catch. And so the whole goal is catch and release, you know, catch now, just go do whatever. Let me know if you have problems, right? I mean, that I know isn't healthy, but that's kind of where I think a lot of people, at least that the circles that I run in, that seems to be kind of the onboarding process, which again leads to those poor results. So my question is, how do you put on a return on your investment, or how do you justify to a business owner whether to pay somebody like you or for them to slow down long enough for them to be able to do this? I mean, is there anything any encouragement or anything that you can help us with on that?
Well, the ROI is shown in the statistics that you and I have both been talking about today, the ROI of a good onboarding program.
Right.
The other really important thing, when I coach executives, I'm already coaching them on things like time management because they have too much on their plate. So they bring up this same question, like, I don't have an onboarding program. Where am I going to find the time to do that?
Yep.
So in addition to coaching them on time management, I coach them on delegation.
Okay.
So I always suggest that they delegate the creation of the onboarding program to their team. So for example, if you were using this checklist that I have, there's, I don't know, 20 or 25 items here. They could split the list in half between a couple of their team members. They could break it up between 5 team members and have each person handle 5 or 6 of these tasks and pull them together.
Okay.
So right there, it takes it all off of the hiring manager's plate.
Okay.
And it splits it up amongst the team. It divides up the tasks and the time that it would take. And that's really the most efficient way to create the program. And it's time effective, time efficient, and then it creates the robust program that is needed so that the new hire can have a really good experience.
Wow. I mean, it's so hard at being a business owner myself, and, you know, trying to be able to, you know, I got to juggle all these balls. I got to keep all these plates spinning in the air. And here comes Monique, and now she's got 20 some things she wants me to add. So I totally get if you're listening, I totally get how you're feeling overwhelmed. But I think that, like she said, the statistics bear this out, that, you know, 1 in 5 of your hires are going to leave in the first 45 days. So again, if you hire 10 people, you know, you're talking about 2 out of those people aren't going to work. Now we have to go hire and do that again. So it almost feels like doing it right the first time is a whole lot better. And then you won't have to have this, you know, 82% and 70%, all these high numbers of problems if you don't do this right. And I think if we were honest with ourselves and we ask you to grade yourself, if you're listening, and you have that capacity to hire, or you're involved in that, or you see it from afar, grade yourself on what your current onboarding process looks like. And I know this might be a blind spot for people. And so if you say, oh my gosh, ours is awesome, you know what, do yourself a favor and ask your last 2 hires, how successful that onboarding process was, because I think they would give you a much better answer than maybe you're willing to give yourself. So if you're talking to somebody and they do have a blind spot with that, Monique, what are some things that you help them with? Or do you just, hit them between the eyes and say, hey, deal with it?
Well, to your point that you made earlier, if someone is an entrepreneur, maybe a small business owner, because I work a lot with corporations and executives where they have large teams, and maybe they can split this list up and
Sure.
create a program, but a smaller organization may not have the people resources to do that.
Right.
So if that's the case, because of course it definitely is overwhelming, entrepreneurs need to understand that it's never perfect right off the bat. It's okay to have good intentions and start off with maybe 1/3 of the things on this list, and slowly add to it.
Okay.
So that it's not all feeling like you have to complete it the night before you make
Sure.
the hire. So it's all about balancing your time and doing what you can. And
Okay.
new hires will understand that. They're looking for reliability. So if you're saying, this is the onboarding program we have now, we're constantly improving it, and they see that it's constantly being improved,
Sure.
that's
Gotcha.
gonna help a lot, versus someone that's all talk and does not act on that.
Gotcha. Well, and I think that's thanks for sharing that, because I think in my mind, I would have missed that completely. Out of 20 things, I'm thinking I got to do all 20. And if, from what I heard, and if I understand you, it's better to do 10 to start than to do none, obviously, but that didn't even resonate in my mind until you said that. So just give me a little comfort that you'd rather I do 10
Yes.
than none, with the thought of I'm going to go from 0 to 20. So do what you can on the checklist and just work your way up from there.
Yes, it can be done in phases.
Okay, good. Well, that makes me feel better, because I don't want to take on 20 things, again, to what we were talking about. And even if we have time management, even if we have delegation, those things are fantastic. There's still that thought in my mind as an entrepreneur that nobody can do it as good as me. I'll just have to stay later, work longer, work harder. And those are all pieces that you and I as coaches try to help people realize that might not be the answer. It might be, but it might not be. And so hopefully, if you're listening, you're at least getting encouraged along the way that it isn't something that you have to, just, invest a bunch of time in without, before you run.
Exactly. Entrepreneurship in itself is a marathon, not a sprint. So you really have to pace yourself.
Sure. Cool. So I have another question. So now we have this person sitting in front of us. They're showing up at 8 o'clock and they're sitting there. They come to their desk, and, I hear a lot about, and I've seen a little bit more on LinkedIn as of late about welcome packages. And, in some ways I think, why would I want to give this guy a Snickers bar? I mean, I feel kind of weird that way, but that's what I think of a welcome package. What do you see in that? What do you see as the next, kind of up and coming thing from a welcome package, to welcome these people into their new place of employment?
I've been seeing a couple different things in companies. Some companies have a lot of their own branded T-shirts, hats, paraphernalia, pens, things like that. So those things are always okay to give someone in a welcome package. Okay. Some companies don't do any at all, especially now with COVID and all of that. They're more eliminating some of the tangible things that they're giving out. And others, just based on budget, they're not giving too many of the tangibles. But I think a company has to really look at what's important to them and what are they trying to convey to a new employee. And if it's if they truly have t-shirts and hats that are important for various reasons to
Sure.
advertise and promote the company, then that should go in the bag. But I think it really is, it's all over the board now
Okay.
with what companies are doing.
But is it frowned upon, I'll say it that way, for a new team member to show up and there be nothing? I mean, I got to say I'm old school, so I wouldn't, if I started at a new job, I mean, I haven't started at a new job since 1986, so I don't really know what that's like. But if I did, I don't think I wouldn't have this expectation. Is that something that's shifting with the younger generations coming on, where there is an expectation? Will I hurt myself if I don't do something, even if it's a Snickers bar, so to speak?
What I'm seeing now is that it's not really frowned upon.
Okay.
And that it's all based on the company's values that they're trying to convey. So, and again, if that doesn't align with the values of the new employee, that's part of where there might be a gap.
Yeah.
So all these things are important for a new hire to know before they start, is the values of the company, the culture, things like that.
Gotcha. So if you're listening and you're thinking, hey, I got a great idea, because I used to have one on my desk, I don't know what it is, but the stress ball, right? I mean, if you're going to do that as a like a welcome gift, I'm thinking you might be sending the wrong message. So I think there's some things not to do, right? And sometimes we have this great idea and it's like, that probably wasn't the smartest idea. But I think the goal for a welcoming package, a welcoming gift, whatever you want to call it, I think the goal is to welcome them, but it's also transcends day one, because, you know I'm working with a client right now, and I did hire somebody not too long ago, and I do check in with that individual, not weekly, but we've been doing it every 3 weeks or so. And just purely to say, hey, this is what I promised you, not from a compensation perspective, but more from, this is the expectation, this is the culture, how are we doing in that? Because I really want to know that. And so I think the message really is, which you did a great job of laying out, is that onboarding isn't a 1-week deal. This is a 90-day deal minimum, to be able to let that person know that they have a buddy, they have a mentor, and they have scheduling, opportunities with these people. So is that all those chunks are in your checklist then, correct?
Yes, all of that's in the checklist. And I have to say, Dave, I'm so impressed that you ask for feedback about what they are experiencing. I think that's just such an excellent practice to be in for a hiring manager or the business owner to be asking, are you having a good experience? Am I living up to what I promised?
Yep.
And I think new hires value that question, because it gives them a chance to give you feedback that you have asked for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the earlier, and I'm doing this for one of my clients, so it's actually not even for somebody on my team, it's for a client. And I keep thinking that the earlier that we request feedback and the earlier that we ask for it and we set it up that way, I think it makes life a whole lot easier. They're going to be a much more engaged employee. Their energy is going to be most likely positive. They're going to take less days off. They're going to be just a more engaged employee. And we saw from Gallup that, 1 out of 3 people in our company show up engaged, which is scary when you think about 100 people on a team or in a company, that only like 33 of them are showing up with some real positive, hey, let's get this done, let's move forward. This big chunk of people are just kind of like, yeah, let's fly under the radar today. Let's get as little done as possible. So we're already at a huge disadvantage. And that's why I think this topic is so critical, is we decide where this starts.
Exactly.
And I love that.
One of the corporate jobs that I took in the recent past, I would say 10 or 15 years ago, but it was a time when onboarding was a thing and it was a growing concept.
Yeah.
I was interviewed and the position was an HR manager. So I was interviewed by people in the HR department. Those are the people that should know about onboarding.
Right.
And during the interview, not only did the HR director come in 30 minutes late to interview me.
Oh boy.
But then I asked perfectly reasonable question, what does your onboarding program look like for me?
Yeah.
And they asked what I meant by onboarding.
Uh-oh. Did a red flag
It should have been a red flag.
Yes,
I took
there
the
you
job.
go.
I took the job anyway, but I was one of the 20% that left in 45 days. That was a clue right there. They didn't have a robust onboarding program, and I could tell right from day one.
Yeah. Wow. And I guess, again, we try every week to find tips for people that are minimal in cost. So if you don't want to invest energy and money, quite frankly, in hiring somebody like Monique, that's fine. You then can do this. But these things that she's talking about, this checklist, doesn't cost anything. And imagine the cost to that company that, hired Monique, and then she only lasted 45 days, and then they had to go through the process again. And there's these unknown costs of I think personally, when a team has somebody, they try to embrace Monique or anybody, and then it doesn't work. Oh, there's doubt, and there's questioning, and there's skepticism, and there's some negativity. There might be some negative energy. There's something that goes on that, what the heck happened? What did we do wrong? There's just some unknown costs that you'll never be able to determine what that costs. So I think to have these free tools like this, and either, again, invest in yourself and do it, or that's why there's people like Monique out there, is to be able to have somebody come alongside you. You're so good at what you do. Why in the world why do you have to wear all those hats? Take that one HR hat off. Let, Monique take care of that for you, or somebody like her, to be able to really, take that off your plate. And I see such success when we surround ourselves with successful coaches. So that's so cool that you do that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very fulfilling for me.
Cool. Well, hey, I got 2 questions for you, and then I'm going to let you go as we start to come in for a landing. I want to know Monique's tip of the week for people listening. If you had one thing that you want to make sure that they get out of it, what would it be?
Many of the executives that I work with talk to me about branding.
Okay.
And they don't understand how to brand themselves. And what I tell them is that branding is about who you are and your own experiences. And we've all had unique experiences. So the tip that I would give people related to their own growth, their own professional development, is to leverage your experiences in life, in the workplace, and use those to your advantage as you're developing yourself as a professional and as you're developing your brand.
Wow, that's cool. And so many people forget that they are a brand, and they just forget that that's the case. And, I don't know how it is in Phoenix, but in Milwaukee, it's kind of a small community, and if you burn a customer or you burn a company, it kind of gets out there. And if your brand is not a positive, oh my gosh, I'd hire this person in a minute brand, then I would highly encourage you to, do what she said, do some self-discovery, invest some time in yourself, because that can, nothing worse than you fit a job to a T, but because of some negativity that somebody heard somewhere, you get passed over on those positions. So thanks so much for sharing that. So the last question is, which is always fun. So what's one thing that you feel comfortable sharing with the audience that they wouldn't know about you?
I would say that my trauma background, I have a background of childhood trauma, and I have actually leveraged that as my brand.
Okay.
working with executives and helping them develop themselves. And that's what my book is about. It's a leadership development book that's called Leading in Captivity, a survival guide for corporate executives. So in that book, I discuss my trauma and how I worked through it and how I worked through it in the corporate world and with all the micro trauma that happens in the corporate world. I guess that's my sharing.
Leading in Captivity. When are we thinking this is going to be released, Monique?
Well, I'm pitching it to publishers now. I decided not to self-publish.
Okay.
I'm going to traditionally publish. So I'm pitching it to publishers now, and I'm hoping for the middle of next year for the actual publishing.
So cool. Well, keep us posted. That sounds Leading in Captivity. I'm already like, oh my gosh, that's a cool name. So thanks for sharing that. So again, if you're listening today, you know, and if something like is resonating with you, I just encourage you to, rather than just go on to the next podcast, rather than just go on to the next activity, I'm encouraging you to take an action and call or reach out to Monique. Be able to, you know, have somebody come alongside you and help you. We talk about this all the time. Tiger Woods has a ton of coaches. There's nothing wrong with that. He has, you know, people looking outside at his swing, people looking at his attitude, his behaviors, his techniques. They're looking at all these things. I would highly encourage you, if onboarding in your company is not what it is or needs to be, you know, reach out to Monique. So Monique, what's the best way for somebody to connect with you if they do want to learn more?
They can go to my website, which is mdconsultingglobal.com. And on that website, there is all my social media links, information about books I already have and the book that's about to be published. And they can connect with me and set up a consultation.
Awesome. And I'm so impressed by the global piece. I'm so bummed I didn't do Positive Polarity Global, because now that sounds so cool. So congratulations on that. mdconsultingglobal.com is the spot to go. So again, that's a free deal. That's, you know, in 3 to 5 minutes, you're going to be able to determine if there's a connection, if there's something there that you want to learn more about. And I highly encourage you, as I do every week, we do this for you to be able to help you with that glitch in your swing. It might be a blind spot you don't even know. And again, I encourage you, if you have any involvement with onboarding, ask the people around you how their onboarding experience was. It's just earth-shattering to realize that these statistics are accurate. So again, thanks so much, Monique, for hanging out with us. I'm excited. I can't wait to see your checklist. So send that to me, because I need it like tomorrow. So, because I'm actually onboarding somebody tomorrow. So please, I want to see how good I'm going to do. And again, if you feel comfortable, reach out to her. And I'm so honored that you hung out with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. I had a great time. And thanks to all your listeners.
Absolutely. So again, please reach out to Monique. And if you have any questions, let her know. We'll be happy to help. She'll be happy to do her best for you. And she's got books, she's got resources. There's so much there. And so please make yourself available to that. And until next time, you know, take care and make sure that you catch one of your team members doing something right this week. Go out of your way to say, hey, great job. I saw what you did. It's easy to catch somebody doing something wrong. Let's catch somebody doing something right. Until next week, take care.